Close your eyes and imagine living a life you love, unapologetic and unbothered, free from daily microaggressions from Karens and Kens, free from the fear of police brutality and systemic racism. Wouldn't that feel amazing? Now open your eyes. What if I told you that it's possible? Hear inspiring stories and get the actual blueprints from brothers and sisters of the diaspora who are living out their wildest dreams abroad. You've heard the term, now be inspired by the movement. I'm Krishan Wright, and this is Blaxit Global. Stephen Labossiere once said, always put your best foot forward because you never know where your next step may lead you. I feel like he had my next guest in mind. TaNesha Barnes is a true Renaissance woman. She's a global lifestyle entrepreneur, having made a name for herself in beauty with her T Barnes skincare brand and in travel under her T Barnes Global Travel Concierge business. She's now added running a palace to her list of accomplishments as she's recently been named General Manager of Spy Palace in Morocco. And today, she's here on Blaxit Global. Welcome to Blaxit Global, TaNesha.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Let's talk about your life in Austin, Texas, your early beginnings.
Well, Texas, I'm a Texan, I haven't lived in Texas since I was 12 years old, but Texas is you're either of it or you aren't. And I grew up in a very large family on both sides, really. We had 100 or have 185 acres of land that my great grandparents bought from their slave owners. I have 7 generations of my family alive. So Texas was just pivotal in grounding me, giving me a sense of identity, family, safety. So I think that Texas really rooted me in a feeling of belonging. When my great grandmother was alive, they started building a new house. And because we still had and would stay in the house that was built in the 1800s. This floor was coming apart. We'd have mattresses everywhere. It was wonderful and insane all at the same time. We would bathe 3 kids to a bucket outside, and you would run to be the first kids in the bucket because the other kids had to bathe after you. So it was always a contest to see who could get to the bucket first. And you had the 2 cousins that you didn't mind bathing with.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so great. Black joy right there, you know?
Oh, it was. I think that, I had a lot of dualities, way more than dualities at that point. I was one of 5 Black kids in my class or in my school, not my class, my whole school. And so I had the challenges of Blackness in all white community. But then every weekend we would go to my cousin's house and they lived in the projects or I guess in low income housing, double Dutch, and it was all Black folks. And so I always had a lot of balance between class and just a lot of different cultural understandings.
So, what role did those foundational points in your life play in your decision to leave the US?
So I think that leaving Texas because of my dad's career at 12, at a very young age, I understood me, really well. And I think that that played a really good part in how I dealt with change and shifting. But when you move and you kind of know who you are, the world doesn't seem as scary to you. Like I don't know that I was seeking more than I was just absorbing and experiencing it. I moved through the world kind of whimsically, but with my feet kind of really firmly planted in who I was.
Is that what ignited that spark towards entrepreneurship?
I went to Russia as an exchange student at 16. That sparked my first sense of freedom and independence and adventure. And I went with a school group, but I was again the only Black person. I tried to get other Black kids to come because it was right. I'm gonna age myself, but it was right after the Cold War. Russia and the US were doing programs through your school to be able to do inter classroom type things. So you're on satellites having classes together. I took Russian. So I was really trying to recruit other Black students to like come with me because they were paying for this. It was free. And I was like, we can go and study in Russia. And everyone's like, wow, why?
It's like
What?
you may have lost me when you said Russia.
But for me, it was just another adventure. And I think that because I had been moving and readjusting, and that was always exciting for me. I like the newness of things. And I remember being on the bus and like looking at my mom outside the window, and I started crying because I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? And my mom started, you don't have to go. You can get off the bus right now. And I was like,
Aw.
no, I'm going. And I did. And I never looked back. Like that moment was so pivotal. But there was something about travel and independence and freedom that I think really spoke to me. And, simultaneously, I had gotten my first job at around 14. So maybe 2 years before I traveled, I had been working for Black entrepreneurs, Carol Joy Creations, Victor and Carol Gelano. I always talk about them because they were so pivotal in my current life. I saw this Black family. We were all friends and all a big community supporting themselves and their children through college. They were the first African American greeting card company. Hallmark and all of these other companies really copied them. Oh, Black people want to be on cards. Oh, okay. But that was all from them. And then once I got to college, I started doing interning from like 94 to 98 was at Def Jam. So I was this young woman in New York, having these experiences. And here I am at Def Jam, and I'm seeing these young Black men walk in jeans and white tee and white sneakers and like have these meetings with people, and the respect, the creativity, and just the space to be themselves and to push at that envelope when, people were trying to deny them being themselves. And I think I just I probably knew from 14 that I was always going to work for myself. But I definitely think the combination of that very first work experience, then going to Russia on my own and having an amazing experience there, and then going to college and being planted in the Renaissance age of hip hop. Like it was just the prime time of Biggie and Puffy and, Jay-Z and everybody at the beginning of these careers making Black life profitable, Black art profitable, and on their own terms, as they were in their flashy clothes or in their jeans. And like, that was really inspiring to me. Yeah, I never looked back.
It definitely served you well. I'm guessing your beauty brand came first?
Actually, no. My very first business was out of my dorm room in New York, and it was an event marketing company called Echoes of Ebony. And I did it with my girlfriend, and we would produce events through the college and outside the college. So I did like the Fugees when they first came out, so many different like young hip hop artists in New York City at that time. And we would produce these events. And so a lot of it was like production oriented, event oriented. After college, I moved to Italy. In Italy, I started working for a designer. And that's where I really learned production. And I learned, I really took on the role of distribution and finding her new and interesting ways to get her brand beyond Florence, Italy, and out into the world. So I think that was pretty much what taught me kind of how to do this thing. When I got back, I did more work as an assistant, and then I went off on my own, and young and ambitious and a little arrogant, and and started doing event marketing. And my very first event marketing job was with Wendy Williams and this Gator company. And I ended up, I don't even know how I met these guys, Russian Jews. And because I could speak a little bit of Russian really, really well, like I'm very good at the little bit that I do speak. I speak so well that people think I speak Russian perfectly.
I
But
love it.
they fell fell in love with me. And I started doing these amazing events. And the first event I did, I pulled Wendy Williams in when she was still on the radio. And I paired it up with like Cameron, some hip hop artist. And I was selling gators, like gators and furs, girl, gators and furs. But I did $24,000 worth of sales for them in 4 hours.
Wow.
That just generated more business. I started doing importing like Fendi and Gucci from Italy. So like it kind of started with that. So I'm in Brooklyn now because I've left Italy. I've come back. I moved to Brooklyn. My mom's friend, who was a hairstylist who still did jerry curls, she called me because she wanted me to help her with this internet thing. And she wanted me to sell her business. And so I started helping her with this internet thing. And I just started looking at the salon. I was looking at the numbers and I'm like, you know what? I could do this. And at that time, she was making a pretty good profit. Her clientele was older, they were stable. She had been in business for 25 years. And I took it over and I upgraded the space and, I Tanisha-fied it, as I like to say. And and I increased her business by 300% in the first year. And so that was really the segue into me getting into beauty. And I had been, like when I got back from Italy, I was working in entertainment and fashion, and I was working for Harriet Cole. We were doing photo shoots and video shoots. And so this was not a new world to me, but I was in need of people to work and they were, not always stable. And I really always loved skincare and makeup. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to school for aesthetics. And my parents are looking at me sideways because, they had just paid for this NYU degree. They have these different expectations of my life, but it's the best decision I ever made. And I always tell people, like, your college degree is an intellectual pursuit. I mean, honestly, whatever you do with it is what you do with it. It really is just cultural capital. But what you can do with your hands is something that no one can take from you. That skill is just always valuable. I went to aesthetic school knowing that I was also going to have a skincare line and I was going to do the whole thing. Because I was doing Dr. Hoshka. And I mean, it was expensive. And I was like, the money that I spend with these people, I could be manufacturing this myself. That journey from skincare led into cosmetics, which led into Bath and Body, which led into my fashion line, which then led into me traveling around the world, trying to manufacture and finding new manufacturers for the fashion. And that led into my clients saying, I want to go. And I was like, well, okay. And I started doing one trip a year, girl, like one trip every January for my clients. And then it just started getting like 10 people, 12 people, 20 people, 30 people, 40 people. I was like, oh, this is something. And that led into 7 trips a year. And so T Barnes Global Travel ended up being a whole entity in and of itself and breaking away from the beauty business to having these two very separate kind of journeys.
I love how you started with the end in mind. Like when you made that decision to go and study aesthetics, you knew that you wanted to build a brand.
It's all about the pivot. I think at every time something has happened, a shift, whether I had to move or, from young, you don't throw away what you've already learned. So you just build on top of things. I always tell people I'm the queen of the pivot. Because I can pivot. I pivot with people. I pivot with men. I pivot.
You have perfected the pivot.
Honey, that pivot can be quick and swift too. None of this stuff was easy. I know people talk about moving around the world. And I mean, as much as I learned in Italy, I've also been spit at and thrown in jail, it's
Gosh.
Russia was cold, there was
Yeah.
there's always those things, but the good that I've extracted from every moving experience, every pivot, every, opportunity to shift and change, I now kind of exist better in that shift and change. So these new opportunities that are coming out of COVID, because I made certain decisions that were right for me to leave the US, came to fruition at the perfect time.
So let's switch gears for a bit and talk about chance encounters because I know there's a story there.
Yes. So I have been traveling. I mean, nonstop. I've been traveling nonstop for 7 years, but for the past 3 years, every month. And so I had just come off of Ghana New Year's, which was amazing. Oh my God. It was the best party I've been to since the 90s. If 2020 was this and I got to party like that, I'm okay with it. So it was Ghana, and then January was Cape Verde, and then February was Morocco. I knew what was happening with COVID because I was in Ghana at the time China was blowing up. And I think people in the travel industry that were abroad kind of knew something is a brewing and we need to pay attention to this. So I was kind of watching how Trump was responding. I was really assessing. I have always known that the US is headed towards something. I'm a historian. I have 2 master's degrees in history. So it lends itself to me kind of understanding the cycles of history in the US. And I knew that we were due for this new cycle of white rage, that we were due for this new cycle of, you know, financial depression. These are just, you can see this and trace this in American history. And I had already just started to feel it in my spirit and soul for the past, since Trayvon Martin's death, you know.
Mm.
And so I am on a plane in February, and I'm sitting there in the row by myself. And then this man comes and sits down. You know, we say hi and we just start talking. You know, you have these moments with people. And I always say I fall in love with people. And I don't mean it romantically. I just mean that there are some people that you just fall in love with as another human being. Like they're just great. And that flight was like 10 hours. We didn't sleep. By the time we were landing, I was like, you need some lotion on your elbows. Passing
Oh
him
my
some
gosh.
lotion. Yeah. But we're talking and he tells me that, you know, he owns some properties in the Sahara. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Because I have travel groups in Morocco as one of my territories. I'm in Morocco 2 or 3 times a year with groups. And, you know, I'd love to check some out. I'm always in the Sahara. And so he goes, great. We keep in touch. And he flies from Casablanca to Marrakesh and meets up for dinner with the group. And we have a great conversation. He invites us to Ouarzazate, which is in the Sahara, to one of his riad. And I changed around the trip, which is what I do often. And I always tell people, like, if you're a scheduled person and you're not good with the pivot, I'm not the person to go on trips with, because if a new opportunity pops up, I'm going to take the whole 30 people someplace else because it's a new opportunity, right? And that's to me what makes travel exciting. And Africa is just, it lends itself to that. I ended up hosting the last day dinner party and he loved it. He let me take over the kitchen and make all kinds of menus and redecorate and all of this stuff for the space. And he came in and he just thought it was beautiful. So after the dinner, he tells me that he has a palace in Hamid and he'd like to see what I could do with the project if, you know, re-envision this palace. And I'm like, yeah, I could re-envision a palace.
Wow. I love that. You're like, challenge accepted.
On the spot, girl. I didn't need to think about it. Like, duh, of course. when are we doing this? So we had started
Yeah.
making plans because I had another group right after we got back to go straight to Bali. And then Corona kind of kicked in by the time we landed. You know, we're making decisions. I had to cancel Bali, and well, the world canceled Bali for me. I was like, well, Bali's canceled, the group is canceled, but I'm not canceled. I can go wherever I want to go. And I wanted to be in Africa. I was watching and I was like, this is going to be a shit show in the US. They're
Oh
not
yeah.
prepared for this. And I knew that Africa, like they've already dealt with pandemics. People were already taking it seriously. I was watching what was happening in Rwanda. Like in January, Rwanda had hand washing stations at every single one of their bus terminals. You know, like Africa was responding in January, while Trump was still saying in March that this was a hoax. And I was like, and I'm out. And you know what? Not only am I out, but I'm out with my baby. And I pulled her out of school. And then shortly after, school was canceled anyway. So it was perfect. And I called Muhammad. I was like, hey, yeah, I still think I can come, but I need to bring my kid and, but I can do this work. And he was like, okay, great. And we get to the very last day. My kid is a global baby. So I've been dragging her around the world for a long time, and school's out. So like, what else does she have to do but go to Morocco with her mama? And right,
Exactly.
like, come on.
There are worse things.
There are worse things. And I mean, at that point, people say palace, they say it. I'm like, whatever, it could be, whatever. But we got all packed up. We're at the nail salon and we find out that the king has closed the borders to Morocco. And I'm like, oh, baby girl, our flight's probably canceled. And my kid was so disappointed. Like, she had just got ready for this adventure. I was like, you know what, babe? We're going to go anyway. I called the driver. I said, we're going to go try to get on this flight. And sure enough, they were like, look, you can go, but we don't know if you can come back.
Wow.
And I looked at her and I was like, what do you think? She's like, Mom, I'm not an adult. You have to make that decision. And I was like, okay. I said, but we might not be able to come back. And she's like, she just shook her shoulders. And I was like, all right, we're going. And we threw the luggage on the rack and we were like ready to go. And we got on the very last flight out that landed into Morocco out of the US before the borders closed. It was just a great adventure. And we got there. And then I was like, wait a minute. Now I'm trapped in this country with my baby. I don't know this man. I'm going all the way down to the Sahara. And Morocco was serious. Like, they didn't play any games. Like, the moving around people were doing here, there was none of that. And so at like 1 o'clock in the morning, we're switching cars to another driver that I don't know, driving 50 miles from the border of Algeria. And then I'm thinking,
Whoa.
did I do something really crazy? Yeah, I did. And we roll up to spy and the gates open and we were like, oh, this really is a palace.
I love that.
Oh, I was like, oh, okay, we might be all right here. I mean, there was moments at the beginning, Muhammad was really welcoming, but we were in the middle of crazy. The beginning of COVID everywhere was just kind of like everyone scrambling to figure out how this was going to work. The country's trying to protect themselves. Maybe a week or two, and I started to feel like maybe I had made a mistake. Muhammad was like, well, you're fine here. You're now here with me. You're just like my family, whatever happens. And we tried to leave and get on an evacuation flight, and it didn't work. And honestly, I don't think I wanted it to work. I think that I had succumbed to some of the pressures of family. We turned back around and we took a deep breath and we said, really, we're living in a palace. We have a cook, a maid, and a driver. Like, what? Like, this ain't really that bad.
Exactly. There are worse things.
And I started redesigning the palace. It was amazing, girl. Like, he has at least 3 or 4 what they call magazines, but it's really just storage units of things from at least 300 or 400 centuries of African history, like African artifacts and art. And I'm in heaven. Like, that was just amazing to unearth all that stuff.
And it sounds like your daughter has that same fearless spirit. So there has to be times when you sit back and reflect and marvel at how your life has unfolded.
Oh gosh, absolutely. What I understand now about Texas, because Texas also represents my parents, and my parents have given me love. I have an abundance of love. It's sinful the amount of love I've been given, the amount of support has been poured into me. I really feel safe in the world. And I think that that's what gives me that fearlessness because I've always felt so safe. I'm never really thinking anybody wants to hurt me. I believe that the world conspires for me to be happy. Good things do happen because I expect them to. And then I do the work. I'm not lazy. In Texas, just in general, watching my family, it taught me what labor was, what it means to work, how the integrity that you have, and the service. Like, service for me is such an honor. I feel really deeply about Asia because I really respect how they honor service. It's not it doesn't demean you, it strengthens you. The better you can serve people,
the more integrity and dignity that you have. And so I think that rootedness makes me and gives me that space to be fearless. And I try to give that to my child so that she's not scared of the world, because, great things can happen. This, like, landing here, I mean, it's the perfect pivot, like, it's an opportunity, not just for, design, because the design, I think what Muhammad realized in me is the capability. He saw, I think, in me the ability to be able to organize a crew of men, which is very, very different for people in Morocco. Like, a little Black girl moving around Morocco in a men's world. I call Morocco the world of men. Is different. And then also having the humility and grace and thoughtfulness around culture to start to begin the relationships of being a part of women's sphere, which you don't really get unless you're staying there, time, and you have the respect for culture that's necessary to get let in. I feel like I've been let into this other world in Morocco that I never got to see before, and it's beautiful. I feel very blessed and very thankful that I've been brought in this way as family. Muhammad is a free spirit like me. He just wants to, like, keep growing and be able to roam the world too. So to have someone that's capable, he's just like, here's the keys. Do what you do.
Oh, wow.
So now the rebellions are starting. I call them the uprisings are happening in the U.S. And I'm deeply political. I've been an activist all my life, and I'm watching this from Morocco, in a place on the continent where I always feel peace. And I've always been encouraging people to try Africa, to leave, to move, to, Blaxit makes perfect sense to me, because it's a mission that I've been on for a very long time, and helping people make these transitions. And I said to him, I think that people need a place to go. And I feel so peaceful here. And I think that we can create a residence that will allow for other people to have this peace too, and to get their feet on the continent. Morocco's like a middle ground. I think of it as a middle passage. It's different from West Africa. Like, Morocco has systems. It has a lot of stability and steady electricity and strong Wi-Fi. So that transition from the US to the continent, it's oftentimes a really good middle ground. And I love West Africa and I love South Africa, and I'm just starting to explore East Africa. But they lend themselves to different types of experiences depending on what country that you're in. For me, this is an opportunity to kind of bridge that. And so I said to him, although I would create this as a space that would be open to anybody that shared these principles we're organizing, and I have this team that I put together that's been organizing these principles, you understand that, like, we're really marketing this to Black people. And he goes, cracks me up. He goes, they're going to pay, right?
Exactly. That's all that matters.
I'm like, yeah, they're going to pay. And he's like, okay, that's great. He's like, the Black people need to leave America. Because, he's watching what I'm watching, and he's seeing me cry. And he's like, they need to go. They need to come to Africa. Like, we don't have to live like this.
No, we don't. Not
We
at all.
don't.
And as you said, with your business pursuits, you are serving as that conduit. So let's talk about that a little bit. What are some of the things in your mind that African Americans need to know how to avoid mistakes when going to the continent?
You will never avoid mistakes. Not in Africa. You can have literally 30 languages spoken in one nation. Like, these nations are made up. That's a European invention. These are people that were living in small communities of culture. You're going to make these cultural mishaps, and you have to have the humility to profusely apologize, right? Better understand what the rules are, and just slow down and learn. I think that you cannot get this from a book. I don't care how many things you read. It's never going to prepare you for the continent. People want us there. You don't have to ask permission to be African, right? Like, you don't have to ask permission to go home. And that is a mindset I don't think it has to be set with arrogance. I think that you still have to understand yourself as a tribe of your own that's on the outside, that's coming into a community of people, and you are not of it, and you have to learn from it. But we have a lot to offer the continent, right? There's this bridge between both of us. The continent has peace and land and, you know, cultural practices that are better for us. For Black women, like, it has men that actually want marriage. You know, it has all of these different opportunities to be yourself. You know, like, as outspoken as I am, I've been able to do that in America because I don't depend on white people for my money, right? And
Hmm.
so I can write the stuff I write. I can say the things I say because at the end of the day, Black women are going to rally around my businesses and support me, and I'm going to be okay. On the continent, I can be me, right? Like, I still have to be careful. They're very conservative in those countries. When I'm in Morocco, I cover my hair, you know, like, I don't have to wear a hijab. Nobody is going to make me do it. They, you know, deal with tourists all the time, but I want to be a part of the culture. And I think approaching it as like, you got to sit this stuff out for like 6 months. Just don't talk. Just don't add to the conversation. Just watch, just observe, just learn, ask questions, you know. And I feel like a lot of people, because of American arrogance and this sense of entitlement, don't realize that they don't do the work to decolonize their mind before they go to the continent, and they move similarly to white people. You have to do a lot of work to deconstruct the ideas that you have in your head about yourself, about Africa, about power, about money. All of these things have to be worked out before you get to Africa, because it won't work like that. You will feel better when you're not functioning in this very individualistic way that we function in the US.
Because it's one thing to say, hey, I'm ready to do a Blaxit, but at the end of the day, the common ground is you as an individual. Everything else is geography. So until you start to prepare your mind and
Yes.
do the work, it's not just moving is in and of itself is not going to be the difference. So let's talk about, in the time that we have left, what's next for you.
I mean, what's next is what is. You know, I'm kind of in the moment of what my next is. And Free Black Woman magazine is a part of this, you know, new pivot. I'm not basing this on advertising dollars. We will take advertisers, but we have a list of principles. And those principles are what we are. And we're here about the authentic Black female voice. And we know that that is varied, and it could be as diverse, and people could come with as many different perspectives as possible, as long as it's rooted in historical context and facts. As long as it's rooted in those things, we can have diverse opinions, but we only take advertisers that understand and accept that these are our principles and this is what we do. If you are coming to censor or to monitor or to police Black women's voices or Black men's voices in this publication, we're just not interested in your advertising dollars, which means that it really depends on our subscribers. And I know that once people start to understand the content that's coming out of this, the subscribers will increase. And it's only $24.99 for the whole year. So I'm confident that we're going to grow and get the subscribers that we need and give voice to all of these people. But for me, it really sits perfectly in this new space. We're going through a spiritual revolution, a freedom from the past 600 years of oppression. And in that freedom, that mask and that double consciousness and the triple consciousness that Black people were burdened with is no longer a necessity. There's so much between us. And what I realized with this latest uprising, and I, you know, put out a call to African leaders, like, we need help. We need to be able to get these citizenships. We need to be able to, you know, come home. That requires that all of us start to understand Blackness as a political identity. Because whereas African Americans may feel disconnected from Africa and have, you know, a lot of negative connotations around Africa and things to heal from, Africans also grew up watching the media of us and have negative opinions, have had negative experiences as immigrants in the US. There's just, you know, between Caribbeans and African Americans in New York, there's just so much for us to heal from. And I realized that Africa's the new frontier. There's jobs there. There are businesses to be made. that is the place to be. And it is your birthright. It is the ultimate reparation. It is the ultimate reconciliation with who you are. And we should be taking advantage of this time. But in order to do that, we have to start talking to each other so that we can heal and we can start to understand each other more, because there's so many misconceptions. So working towards Black is my effort to do that. I'm an African American. I've heard it all from every single side, and I see the pain. And the funny thing is that that pain has been poked at, facilitated, and created by the same enemy. And once we understand that and we start to recognize each other collectively under this cloak of Blackness, which is a political identity, it doesn't mean that your tribe doesn't matter. It doesn't mean your religion doesn't matter. It doesn't mean your languages don't matter. It just means that this is how we can unify under this cloak of Blackness.
I think it is time to begin the process of healing. So as we wrap up, Tanisha, where can people find you and connect with you?
My main Instagram is at Barnes Global Lifestyle. That's really me and my shenanigans around the world and all of the projects. All of my businesses have their own Instagrams: Barnes Global Travel, at Barnes Beauty, at Free Black Woman. And you can find me on my websites at tbarnesbeauty.com, tbarnesglobaltravel.com, and youngblackandglobal.com, freeblackwoman.com.
Well, Tanisha, thank you so much for being a guest on Blaxit Global. I took a lot away from this conversation, especially perfecting the pivot, starting with the end in mind, and feeling renewed about opportunities and embracing what is out there on the continent.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I love what you're doing. I'm so excited. And I like that you're a person that you're like, I'm not there yet, but I'm going through this journey and I'm going to go along on this journey with you guys. And that's what people need. Like, it isn't about having done it. It's like pulling people together to say, we're going to do this together collectively. And it's just beautiful. And I love it.
Thank you for listening to the Blaxit Global Podcast. For more information on today's episode, be sure to visit our website at blaxitglobal.com. Has this episode left you feeling inspired to begin your journey, but not quite sure where to start? Download our free guide with the top 5 questions you need to ask before planning your Blaxit. You can find that under the Resources tab of our website. Remember, it's not only possible to live out your dreams unbothered and in full color, it is your birthright.